All right, hello everyone. My name is Gilly. I am one of the project organizers at Amplify MT Youth, which is a media program of Montana Youth Action. Thank you all for being here today. I'm going to pass it over to Ali to introduce herself, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, I'm Ali Caudle. I'm a sophomore at Hellgate High School, and I'm the other project organizer of Amplify MT Youth, along with Gilly. And now Whitney and Buzz, if you'd each like to take a turn and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Buzz, why don't you go first?
Okay, thanks, Whitney, and thanks for the opportunity this afternoon. So I'm a farmer way over here in eastern Montana. In fact, I think I'm 525 miles from the Van Buren exit from my house, and I know that because I have grandkids in Missoula. It's a big state. It's a small community. In addition to being a farmer, and I grow malt barley, the barley used for beer and distilling, durum wheat, which is the pasta wheat, and sugar beets, and then some peas and lentils and things like that. My background, I live here on the north bank of the Missouri River, and I got involved with conservation issues because of the way that the Fort Peck Dam was managed and the problems it caused downstream, and got very involved with conservation districts on a regional basis and national basis. And then I was appointed to the Wheat and Barley Committee by Governor Schweitzer. And Wheat and Barley Committee uses checkoff dollars that we assess ourselves as farmers. And we use that money for education, research, and marketing. And the marketing part, I was able to do trade missions probably to about 20 countries around the world promoting Montana products, which was really a privilege and an eye-opening experience to visit those countries. I'm currently president of the National Barley Growers Association, and one of the first things I did as I became involved with that organization is to get us involved in a sustainability effort. And we joined a group called Field to Market, which has 8 different metrics for measuring sustainability. And this was kind of in a response to our big brewers they were being asked by their retailers, what are your farmers doing out there in terms of sustainability and environmental things? And so we joined this so that there's some continuity and some uniformity on how we measure things like greenhouse gas and water use and water quality and things. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Whitney.
Hey, well, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So I am a 6th generation Montanan. My mom's family came to Montana before we were a state. They came here during the gold rush. And then ultimately my family ended up in Butte, but I was raised in Helena. And I am now a businesswoman. I founded my own successful company about 20 years ago that works alongside big companies, so like Fortune 500 companies and charities, to tackle really complicated problems, just like those that Montanans face every day. And I have a whole lot of grit and a bunch of toughness that came, as it did for you all and many of your listeners, I think, from our ancestors. So over the years, I've helped law enforcement officials protect kids from child sex trafficking. I've managed sort of global initiatives around the globe to increase the number of girls who can attend school, which, as you know, lots of little girls around the world are not in school. I don't think that's right, and I think most people think that's not right. And so we've gotten to work on that. And then also help to open up new markets for products like agriculture products like coffee and cocoa, so that we can all enjoy chocolate bars and coffee from our favorite coffee shop, but also so that farmers have better incomes and have improved crops and have the opportunity to get those to markets. And so I've been really pleased and honored, and I've worked really, really hard to get that done. And then I'll just say that my parents, who I'm very proud of, my mom was Montana's first female majority leader in our state Senate. My father was Montana's longest serving member of Congress. As you know, we have just one in Montana. Hopefully people are filling out their census, and I'm knocking on wood because we should get a second one back. But I'm very, very proud of them and their service as well. And I was raised in a household where we were all expected to help our neighbors and to do everything we could to help people who were struggling. And we each got to find our own path to doing that. And mine turned out to be a private sector path through my business, and a couple of stints in government where I worked in the federal government and here in state government, and alongside governments. But I'm a private sector person. And in my family, they taught us that being a Montanan and being able to be in service to others was really a privilege, but that it was up to sort of every generation to fight for it. And so I am running for governor to fight for it.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for being here today. We're going to kind of go into some more specific questions now. We'll keep them to about a minute. We won't cut you off or anything, but just for the sake of time. So the first question we have has been a hot topic recently. There's potentially a ballot initiative this fall, but do you support the legalization of recreational marijuana?
Yes, we do. So Buzz and I announced, we were the first of anyone running for statewide office to announce that we supported the legalization of up to 1 ounce of marijuana. We believe that it's time to stop pretending that it's not here, because it is, and also regulate it and tax it and take the revenue from it and be able to do more good work to support communities from the smallest towns and the most rural communities to our biggest cities. We think that there's a lot of revenue that can be generated. The state budget office says about $100 million over a 2-year period once it's fully up and running. And that's a lot of money that particularly now our state is going to need. And so yeah, we do support it.
All right, thank you. Okay, let's see. How do you see Montana transitioning towards renewable energy?
Buzz, why don't I start this and you can finish it. We'll make it quick, but I'll say number one, I think I'm grateful to you all and this podcast, and I'm grateful to your generation, because I think you all are holding us accountable in a way that I think adults have let you down. I think that we should move with urgency into a clean, renewable energy future. There's lots of wind potential. There's a lot of solar potential. And I think we can be doing a lot more. And part of the solution to moving with urgency also comes through farmers. So let's have Buzz just say a word about that.
So yeah, thanks. As we transition from, fossil fuels into renewables, we have to thank the people that kept the lights on the past 30, 40 years. But really, the consumers are driving it. People don't want to buy dirty energy anymore. And as we take things like coal strip offline, and we have to be, like I say, thank the people that kept the lights on and help them transition to the new economy. But we have that infrastructure, those power lines that run to the Pacific Northwest, that we can put wind and solar energy into those. So, part of it's logistics, and part of being a farmer is a problem solver, and very basic. Take advantage of the things that we have, and part of that is the transmission lines and the grid that exists in Montana.
Thank you. So along the same lines, how would you address job dislocation in a transitioning energy sector?
Well, we believe there's lots of jobs in a clean, renewable energy sector. So that's one thing. And also as we do transition, as Buzz says, sort of our friends and neighbors at Colstrip, who we should all be very grateful to for having kept the lights on for a generation. But as those jobs transition, there will be a whole lot of good paying cleanup jobs. So we need to make sure that they have those, and that we do everything we can to transition folks into this new economy.
Thank you. While we're on the topic of natural resources, how would you protect public lands here in Montana?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to defeat this guy called Greg Gianforte. We got to get past our June 2nd primary, of course, but he is a threat to the way of life that we have here in Montana, and this real beloved set of public lands and our clean air and our clean water. But we will prioritize it. Buzz and I both have been lifelong conservationists. I've just left the board of the Montana Conservation Voters. When I was around your age, I was an intern at the Five Valleys Land Trust. I was in the board of Glacier National Park Fund. So Buzz and I both, I was in the forestry school at the University of Montana. So we really care about and have had a lifetime of working in the conservation space. And I'll just say, we need people in that governor's office who are going to be tough enough to stand up, including to the Trump administration, should they still be there next year, to stop them from transferring public lands back to the states. Because when people say that, what they really mean is we're going to sell them off to the highest bidder. And we know the highest bidders often are going to want to do things with those lands that don't allow the public to access them. So we will be very focused on making sure we keep Montana, Montana.
Awesome, thank you. We're going to kind of shift gears a little bit here, but how would you advocate for LGBTQ plus youth in Montana?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I mean, it starts with one really important thing, which is making sure that LGBTQ plus community members are present in cabinet and boards and appointments and the staff of the governor's office. Representation is really central and really key. We have committed, Buzz and I, to make half of our cabinet female, and to also make sure that the diversity across the state is included both in the cabinet and in these boards and commissions, which is really, really, really important. And we need to make sure that we include gender, race, sexuality, and other demographics when we make 2,000 appointments. There are 2,000 appointments. So we have a lot of opportunity to highlight and support the diversity of this state, and we will be a champion for equality for everybody.
Thank you. Let's see. Should the state help fund students to attend or achieve higher education?
Oh, certainly, you know, and the state does that now in a variety of ways, and we can always do more. And then I think that includes making sure that we have a tuition freeze, you know, this tuition freeze that Governor Bullock got done, which was terrific, and we have now. But I'll just say that, you know, Buzz was on the school board over in Eastern Montana. He comes from a number of generations of teachers. And education is really important to us, and particularly public education. We're both products of public education, and we think it's really important to make sure that there are pathways, whether it's to four-year schools or to two-year schools and community colleges and apprenticeship programs, and making sure that folks who have the need are able to access resources.
Thank you. Do you think the state government should limit or increase regulation on gun ownership?
So here's what we really believe. We really believe what almost every single Montanan believes, which is that we need to have really good common sense safety measures. So things like background checks are really important, we think, to get done, and Montanans agree with us. So we just need to move to get that done. That's something that we think is centrally important for our state. And you know, Buzz and I both come from families of hunters for generations. And so as gun owners and people who care deeply about the Second Amendment, we do think there's ways to keep our community safe and make sure that folks, you know, who might hurt themselves or others don't have access to firearms.
Thank you. So this is another hot button issue. Do you support a woman's right to choose, and why or why not?
So yes, Buzz and I are both entirely pro-choice. We have both been big supporters of organizations like Planned Parenthood and others over the years who have supported a woman's right to make that decision. That decision is between a woman and her doctor. And what's very concerning to me, for your generation especially, but all women, is that we have a settled law right now called Roe v. Wade. And we're supposed to be able to have access to abortion and reproductive health care. And that is under total and complete assault by Donald Trump and by Greg Gianforte. And we need to stop them. And I will say that as governor of Montana, we will veto any attempt that of a restriction that comes between a woman and her doctor.
Thank you. So we're going to shift gears a little bit again here, but what is your stance on private prisons?
Yeah, so look, I think this is an issue that's both Republicans and Democrats, again, sort of agree on, certainly at a national level, which is that we should move toward a bigger emphasis on treatment and sort of interventions and less on incarceration. And Buzz and I really, support that. We think it's both good public policy as well as good economic policy, because it's very expensive to have people in prison. We've got to focus on rehabilitation as well, and make sure that rather than just punishment, we give folks the opportunity to re-enter society and be a really, productive member of society. So the other thing here that's really, really important to us is mental health. We believe that mental health is just a part of health. So we should maybe stop separating health from mental health, because it's all, we believe, one and the same, and we need to make sure that we have like addiction treatment services and other services that would prevent people from ending up in prisons in the first place.
Thank you.
Just to add one comment with that, if I might. So one thing that's worked well is drug courts, and when there's a first offense before they get further on down the line to committing a felony, drug courts are a way to help them get some treatment and keep them out of that whole penal system. So that's something that I think we need to look at more and fund more. So drug courts is a good thing.
Yeah, and gals, let me just also say this, just to be super clear on actually the core question, which is that it is wrong for private companies to profit off of incarceration. It's just wrong, and we should stop it.
All right, so if both of you want to answer this next question, would you be willing to work across the aisle, and are there any specific issues that you would or would not cross party lines on?
Well, I'll go quickly and then Buzz will jump in. Absolutely is the answer to that. And both Buzz and I have a long career of working with our Democratic friends and our Republican friends. I have a long history of it. I enjoy it. In fact, I think that's the only way you get work done, is to be able to have a willingness to work with one another and also hear one another, listen to what the sort of challenges or concerns that someone else might have. I will say we also have very clear red lines. So on like women's reproductive choice, we will not cross it. That tends to be a little bit of a Democrat and Republican issue sometimes, but increasingly is not, because overwhelmingly Montanans are pro-choice. We have a real clear line about putting hard-earned taxpayer dollars into religious schools. It's unconstitutional. We think we should stop it, but that guy, Greg Gianforte, again, supports it. So we have some things that we will not absolutely not budge on for certain, but we do have a real spirit of and a willingness to work with others. But Buzz, I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Whitney. When you're elected governor or lieutenant governor, you're governor for the whole state. You're not just governor for one party. And, I think in my career, I don't ask people what their political affiliation when we start working on a problem. Sometimes it comes up, sometimes it doesn't. But of course, we work with everybody. So across the aisle and in the whole diversity. And really, both Whitney and I have learned that in order to solve tough problems, you need everyone at the table. You need diverse stakeholders to be involved.
Thank you. So this is obviously the big question right now with everything going on, but what is the responsibility of the governor and lieutenant governor in addressing the fallout from COVID-19?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is on our mind, certainly. I'll say a couple of things. Number one, leadership, right? So what you want in a governor is someone who is going to listen to public health professionals, someone who believes in science and in data. So just like Steve Bullock has done, I think what the first and foremost, what we need to make sure that we have is a trust in science, a trust in facts, and a trust in public health to get our communities safe. Because if we don't have safe and healthy communities, we're not going to have a healthy economy. It just won't work that way. So all of this work, which is so hard for Montanans to stay home in the way that we have, but we have. And so we flattened the curve and we've done it together. And that's what I think Montanans are sort of always willing to do, which is work together. So the first thing a governor has to do is make sure this virus is under control in this state. And then the second thing is to move with urgency into rebuilding this economy that's going to work, again, as Buzz says, for all, not just some of Montana. And there's a lot of work to do there. And one of the ways you do it is you do it with a diverse coalition of experts who help roll up their sleeves. And by the way, his sleeves and her sleeves, because I will tell you, there is a commission right now that has been put together to address the economic impacts of COVID in Montana, and it has 26 people on it. And 22 of those people are men, and only 4 of them are women. Only 2 Native Americans, and not very diverse across other senses as well. And so ultimately, I think that is not how you make good decisions. So in Whitney and Buzz administration, what you will see is people really willing to sort of work together and listening to and learning from people all across the state, because we think better decisions are made that way.
So as Whitney said, listen to the science, keep people safe and healthy. In addition to that, I think the virus has pointed out some really problems with our food chain, especially things like meat, that we're relying on 4 major corporations in the United States that control 80% of the meat trade. Why aren't we have more cattle than we have people in Montana, yet we can't feed ourselves the meat that we want. So to look for opportunities, things like that. Grain also, I'm president of the Barley Growers Association. We need to work on things like trade issues and things like that are having problems with dealing with the virus. The whole pipeline of agricultural products are backed up. So, part of keeping people safe and healthy is food supplies. So something I'd look at very carefully.
Yeah, so the pandemic has also caused people to look more closely at our healthcare system. So along those lines, do you support Medicare for all? And if not, what alternate healthcare plan do you support?
So we are really big fans of a couple of things. One is, you guys have heard about this Medicaid expansion, which is something that happened in the last legislature, and talk about Republicans and Democrats working together. That's what had to happen to get that done. And there was a full 10% of Montana was covered by this Medicaid expansion. And that's a lot of people, right? So that's a little over, I guess technically it's about 95,000 people that were on Medicaid, and that allowed for a whole bunch of Montanans who otherwise would not have had healthcare to have healthcare. And so what we want to do is think about how do we make that permanent so that at least that piece of work that got done continues to get done, and that people who are on that know that they're going to continue to have healthcare, and then build from there. Now, a lot of these issues about how do you access care and what kinds of healthcare are sort of federal issues, right? They tend to happen, and those discussions tend to happen a little more in the Congress than they do necessarily in the governor's office. But the governor is the ambassador for, is the spokesperson for, is the representative of the state. And so one thing that we would be doing and working very hard on is making sure that our lawmakers here who represent Montana, of course, but those outside of Montana, understand what we think is best for Montanans in terms of keeping our communities healthy, and also, rural communities, right? That's something that's really important. If you think about, we're only in Montana, we're in Missoula here today, the 3 of us, in a place where we have access to really good care. That's not true for everybody across the state. And we need to make sure that we increase the opportunity for people to have access a little bit closer to home through some of these rural hospitals, which is something that we've been thinking a lot about.
So yeah, I rely on rural healthcare and critical access hospitals. You know, one thing that would help that and would help a lot of the things that we want to work on is broadband throughout the state. It would help with, you know, being able to access a doctor in Billings or Missoula from a remote part of Montana. So broadband is a big part of our education system and our healthcare.
Thank you. How do you plan to bring more business and industry to Montana?
Well, the same way that business and industry is coming to Montana now, which is keep Montana, Montana, which is make sure that we have great public schools for people, make sure that we have extraordinary access to public lands, which we do, and we should increase access, certainly not decrease access. Make sure that we have things like Buzz just mentioned, which is broadband, really high quality broadband. You know, there's almost 27% of Montanans that are underserved, either don't have access to any connectivity or it's really spotty. We need to fix that for all corners of our state so that including folks who want to do, teleworking. We all noticed how important broadband was, didn't we, during COVID, where the connections weren't as good. And imagine being in a really rural or remote place where you were having to learn online and you couldn't. So we need to make sure that we do those things to make sure that businesses, those are the kinds of things that attract businesses, which is, you know, really good public schools, really good broadband, making sure that we have good infrastructure, including broadband across the state, and that we keep our clean air and clean rivers and public lands, because that's why we're all here, and it's why people would want to come.
Thank you. Oh, do you want
I'll just add just a bit about adding some value to our raw products that we have in Montana. You know, 70 to 80% of our ag exports leave the state in just raw form. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to add value to that, not only in the meat industry, but in the grains. You know, I think during this virus that one of the processors that handles lentils added 6 employees just for the mail order lentil business. So look at lots of opportunities to add value to things that we're doing in Montana.
Of course, thank you. So as we start to get towards the end, we'll kind of ask a couple big picture questions. So the first one is, what do you think is the most pressing issue facing Montana that you would address if elected?
So the biggest thing is to make sure that we have an economy that really does strive to work for everybody, no matter where you live in this state, not just sort of the bigger places like Missoula or Billings or Bozeman. So really working hard at thinking about what does that look like and how can we promote Montana and make sure that Montana is a place, like we say, that people can bring their families and their companies or start them like many of us did. And so, and then I think COVID, is going to be with us for a little while, right? None of us know how long, but it might be a couple of years before we get this really under control. And so that's going to be really facing Montana and the rest of our country, not to mention the planet. And so having really good, steady leadership in these executive offices is going to be really important, and making sure we make good, smart decisions about how we keep people healthy and safe, and then how we rebuild in a way that's better than it was before.
Thank you. So for our final question, what would you, if you all are elected governor and lieutenant governor, what would you like your legacy to be when you leave office?
What a great question. What would I want the legacy to be? I guess, isn't that interesting? Such a good question. I mean, there's so many things that we want to accomplish, but I think fundamentally, the idea would be that we sort of left office with a sort of stronger and healthier Montana in a variety of ways, and that the work that we did reflected all of this place. We talked about rural communities and small towns and how important it is that we think you know, we really need to represent all of Montana, not just some parts of Montana. And I think that what would be really great when we walked out of office 8 years later is that that Montana, you know, was a bit stronger. You know, that our economy was stronger, that our health systems, you know, were stronger, and ultimately that we were able to make sure we kept the integrity of Montana. You know, the place that we wave at each other from behind the wheel. You know, we pull each other out of a ditch. I mean, that spirit and that sort of beauty of togetherness and neighborliness and the way in which we care about our neighbors in Montana is not the way the rest of the country cares about their neighbors. And that's a really important thing. And then when we talk about Montana values, you know, those Montana values of the waving behind the wheel and pulling one another out of a ditch and being willing to talk to anyone, being willing to help anyone. We think that that's really important to keep that integrity of that value set in place. So we would hope, I think, that that would be even stronger. But Buzz, what do you think?
You said it very well, Whitney. And I think my legacy, if I could pick it, would be like the way I've lived my life, and whether it's conservation or stewardship or whatever word, sustainability that you want to use, it's to leave something in a little better condition than what you found it. So really kind of paraphrasing what Whitney said in all those things, and keeping your values intact. I mean, if you make something better but you lose your values, you really haven't made the progress.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. Before we kind of wrap this up, to everyone watching this, please go out and vote. The primary is soon. Doesn't matter who you vote for, just go vote. So that's my little pitch for today. I do that every time. But yeah, thank you both so much for being here. We really do appreciate it.
Hey, thank you both so much. And everyone who's listening, keep up the good work.